The horse galloped through dangerous mountain paths as bullets flew nearby. On its back wasn't a soldier or rebel fighter, it was a Catholic priest from Chicago. Today that same man leads 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide as Pope Leo XIV. Before he wore fancy white robes, he cleaned floors, taught kids math, and stood face to face with killers and drug lords in South America. This isn't your boring church history lesson. This is the jaw-dropping story of a regular American kid who became the world's top religious leader. His journey mixes war heroes, deadly gangs, jungle adventures, and high-stakes Vatican secrets. Smash that subscribe button right now. I promise you've never heard a success story this wild, and your friends won't believe it when you tell them. September 14, 1955. Most American kids played with toys and watched TV shows, but little Robert Francis Prevost was different from the start. His family was a real mix: Italian grandfather, French grandmother, Haitian great-grandfather, and roots from Louisiana. His dad Louis wasn't just any father. He helped lead soldiers onto the beaches on D-Day in World War II, saw the worst fighting ever, and came home wanting to make a better world. His mom Mildred, a book lover with Creole roots, taught him that stories and learning could change lives. Who could have guessed their youngest boy would one day become the Pope? The Prevost house in Dalton, Illinois, was just a normal home. 3 brothers would play church in their living room, taking turns as priest, helper and crowd. While his brothers moved on to other games, Robert kept going. Something deep inside him had been lit up, something that would push him across the world, and through dangers most people run away from. 13-year-old boy leaves home for church school in Michigan. He has one small bag and big dreams. St. Augustine School wasn't just any school, it was boot camp for his soul. While other teens worried about zits and girls, Robert studied old languages, church rules, and faith stories. But he wasn't just a bookworm. This kid did it all: ran the yearbook, joined student council, won speech contests, got top grades. He was learning to be a whole person, not just a holy one. Then came college at Villanova, where he picked math as his main subject. Why math? Because Robert saw patterns where others saw mess. He found God's plan in numbers. He was building brain power that would later help him deal with tricky church politics, complex rules, and running one of the world's biggest groups. Even while doing well in school, he felt a deeper pull. Between classes, he taught math and science to high school kids in Chicago. He learned that teaching wasn't just about numbers, it was about changing lives, lifting people up, giving them tools to build better futures. These weren't just jobs, they were practice for something much bigger coming his way. September 1, 1977, while disco music played on radios and Star Wars packed movie theaters, 22-year-old Robert made a choice that changed everything. He walked into a church in St. Louis as a normal college grad, and came out a year later as Brother Robert, a beginner monk in the Order of St. Augustine. This wasn't just a job change. This was ending one life to start a brand new one. The Order of St. Augustine isn't your normal church group. Started in the 1200s, they're thinking warriors who mix deep faith with hard study. They don't just pray, they think, ask hard questions, and push for answers. They don't hide from the world's problems, they jump in to help fix them. For Robert, this was perfect. He wasn't looking for an easy path to heaven, he wanted the hardest way to help others. On September 2, 1978, he made his first promises. Think about what that means. A young man giving up marriage, family, money, and personal goals to serve something bigger than himself. 3 years later, he made these promises forever. No turning back. And on June 19, 1982, in an old church in Rome, he became a priest. The boy from Chicago was now Father Robert, changed forever. Ronald Reagan was president, MTV was hot, and most Americans were trying to get rich. But Father Robert, he got on a plane to Peru, leaving behind safety for danger and the unknown. Peru in the 1980s wasn't a vacation spot, it was a war zone, where the Shining Path killers fought the government. Kids died from simple sicknesses that American doctors could easily cure. Why Peru? Why leave safe American church life for this mess? Because Robert knew that faith without action is just empty talk, and love without risk is fake. He didn't go to Peru as a tourist. He went as a worker, ready to get dirty, to serve the poorest people. First stop, Chulucanas, where he became a church manager, in one of Peru's roughest areas. Every day brought new problems, killings, hunger, corrupt officials, and hopeless people, but every day also let him make real change. He learned Spanish, then Portuguese, then Quechua, the native mountain language. He didn't want to talk at people, he wanted to talk with them in their own words and ways. The biggest change came when he moved to Trujillo, in 1988. Here he taught, preached, and built new things. As head of the priest school, he trained new church leaders. Most importantly, he put Peruvians in charge, making sure the church wasn't just another foreign group telling locals what to do. Let me tell you what Peru was like when Father Robert lived there. The Shining Path wasn't just a protest group, they were killers who murdered whole villages, used kids as shields and bombed churches and schools. The army wasn't much better, with death squads doing horrible things too. Stuck in the middle were the normal people. Father Robert came to help. Here's where his story gets really amazing. While other foreigners ran away from Peru, Father Robert went deeper into danger zones. Think about this: an American priest on horseback, riding mountain trails that weren't even real roads, bringing medicine and prayers to villages that hadn't seen a priest in years. These weren't fun trips. These were life or death journeys through areas run by people who hated the church. He spoke out against President Fujimori's government, not to be popular, but because he saw the kidnappings, torture, and killings with his own eyes. He helped people from Venezuela, who ran to Peru, but found hate and violence. He stood up to the Shining Path, staying brave even when they said they wanted to kill him, and when kids told him about being hurt, not just by soldiers or terrorists, but by priests too. He didn't hide it or move the bad priest somewhere else. He took action. He checked the facts. He helped the victims, even when it meant fighting with fellow priests, even when church bosses got mad at him. He picked truth over comfort, doing what was right instead of what was easy. By 1998, something amazing had happened. The quiet young man from Chicago had become a leader people trusted, someone who could handle the most complex political and spiritual challenges. The Augustinian order recognized this when they elected him prior provincial of their American region. At 43, he was one of the youngest men ever to hold this position. But leadership in the Catholic Church during the late 1990s and early 2000s wasn't just about management skills. This was the time of the sexual abuse scandals, when the Church's trust was being destroyed by revelations of cover-ups and institutional failure. Father Robert, now Father Priors, had to make impossible decisions. When believable accusations emerged against Father James Ray, an Augustinian priest, Robert had to balance justice for victims, fair process for the accused, and safety for the community. His decision to suspend Ray, while allowing him to live near a school, was later criticized. But what's remarkable is that he was one of the few church leaders actually taking action, rather than simply moving problems elsewhere. 2001 brought an even bigger challenge. Prior General of the entire Order of St. Augustine worldwide. This wasn't just about America anymore. This was about coordinating Augustinian missions across 6 continents, managing thousands of priests and brothers, overseeing universities, hospitals, churches and schools in dozens of countries. For 12 years, Robert led this global organization through a time of unprecedented change and challenge. But his heart never left Peru. Even as he traveled the world in his new role, he kept his connections to the people and communities he'd served. When Alberto Fujimori was pardoned by President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski in 2017, Robert didn't stay silent. He spoke out again, demanding accountability. insisting that delayed justice was denied justice. This wasn't ancient history to him. These were real people he knew, real suffering he'd witnessed. 2014 brought a surprise that nobody saw coming. Pope Francis himself, a Latin American, who understood the region's challenges, appointed Robert as apostolic administrator of the Diocese of Chimbote, Peru. After decades of global leadership, he was going back to where it all began. But this time, he wasn't going as a young missionary, he was going as a bishop, with all the authority and responsibility that came with it. Chimbote wasn't a glamorous city, it was a working-class diocese, facing all the challenges of modern Peru: drug trafficking, migration, environmental damage, poverty, corruption. But Robert didn't see problems, he saw opportunity. One of his first acts was creating a diocesan commission on integral ecology, years before environmental issues became mainstream church concerns. He understood that caring for nature wasn't just good policy, it was fundamental to the gospel message. As Bishop of Chimbote, he continued fighting for abuse survivors, but now with Bishop's authority behind him, he didn't just encourage victims to come forward, he made sure they were heard, investigated and supported. He didn't just criticize corrupt officials, he worked with civil authorities to build transparent, accountable systems. But perhaps most importantly, he showed a different kind of church leadership. Instead of living in a bishop's mansion, he chose simpler housing. Instead of traveling in luxury, he used public transportation when possible. Instead of surrounding himself with yes-men, he sought out voices of disagreement and challenge. He wasn't trying to be popular, he was trying to be faithful. 2023 brought the call that would change everything. Pope Francis had been watching Robert's work for years, had seen how he combined deep thinking with caring for people, how he balanced tradition with new ideas, how he spoke truth to power regardless of the consequences. When the position of prefect of the dicastery for bishops opened up Missionary, one of the most influential jobs in the Vatican, there was really only one choice. The dicastery for bishops isn't just another Vatican office, it's where the future leadership of the Catholic Church is decided. Every bishop appointment worldwide crosses this desk. Every major church decision involves this office. As prefect, Robert wasn't just advising Pope Francis, he was helping shape the global direction of the Church for generations to come. One of his most controversial decisions was removing Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, a vocal critic of Pope Francis, who had been causing division within the American Church. Lesser leaders might have found a compromise, a way to avoid conflict, but Robert had learned in Peru that sometimes leadership requires making hard choices, even when they're unpopular. His closeness to Pope Francis during this period started widespread talk about the future. Vatican experts began describing him as popabile, Pope material. He was seen as someone who could continue Francis's reforms, while bringing his own unique perspective as an American, with extensive Latin American experience. May 8, 2025. The white smoke hadn't risen from the Sistine Chapel in over 12 years. Pope Francis was gone, and the cardinals of the world had gathered to choose his successor. In the age of instant communication and social media, the conclave remained one of the world's last mysteries. 120 cardinals locked away from the world, making the most important decision in Christianity. The first day ended without a decision, as expected. The real voting began on day 2. Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost wasn't considered the front-runner. He was seen as a compromise candidate, someone who could unite the progressive and traditional wings of the church. But sometimes the compromise candidate isn't settling for less, sometimes they're exactly what the moment needs. On the second ballot of the second day, white smoke finally appeared. Cardinal Prevost had been chosen as the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church. In choosing the name Leo XIV, he honored both the great papal tradition and signaled his own intentions. Leo the Great had defended Rome against Attila the Hun. Leo XIII had fought for workers' rights. Now Leo XIV would face the challenges of the 21st century. When Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich announced Habemus Papam, we have a Pope, The crowd in St. Peter's Square erupted in joy. But the man stepping onto the central balcony wasn't a stranger to hardship or challenge. This was someone who had faced down terrorists and corrupt politicians, who had fought for the powerless and spoken truth to power. This was Pope Leo XIV, standing on that balcony, looking out over the thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square. The newly elected Pope Leo XIV felt the weight of history on his shoulders. He was the first Augustinian pope in the Church's history, the first American-born pope, the first pope who had spent significant time in Latin America before becoming pope. But more than titles and firsts, he was a man who had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment, not by seeking power, but by serving others. His first words to the world were simple but powerful: "Thanks for Pope Francis's work," and a call for the Church to be a light in a world increasingly lacking in faith. As Pope Leo XIV, he brings a unique view to the papacy. His mixed cultural background, Italian, French, Haitian, Creole, reflects the global church he now leads. His language skills, English, Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, Latin, and Quechua, allow him to speak directly to Catholics around the world. His experience in Peru gives him first-hand knowledge of the challenges facing the Church in developing countries. But perhaps most importantly, his life story shows the kind of leadership the Church needs in the 21st century. Not leadership that seeks comfort and privilege, but leadership that embraces challenge and sacrifice. Not leadership that speaks only to the powerful, but leadership that amplifies the voices of the powerless. Not leadership that protects institutions at the expense of people, but leadership that reforms institutions to better serve their mission. Who is Pope Leo XIV when he's not wearing the white robes? He's someone who still plays Wordle with his brothers, who follows the Chicago White Sox baseball team religiously, who cheers for Villanova basketball. He's someone who learned Quechua, not because he had to, but because he wanted to speak with native Peruvians in their own language. He's someone who chose to ride horses through dangerous mountains rather than stay safe in air-conditioned offices. These aren't just interesting facts, they reveal something essential about his character. This is someone who never forgot where he came from, who never lost touch with simple human joys, who never let his extraordinary responsibilities disconnect him from ordinary human experiences. In a world where religious leaders are often seen as distant figures, giving orders from ivory towers, Pope Leo XIV represents something different: approachable holiness, relatable goodness, down-to-earth spirituality. From a boy playing church in a Chicago home, to the leader of over 1 billion Catholics, Pope Leo XIV shows us that being great isn't about getting power, it's about helping others. His life proves that real leaders don't run from hard times, they ride straight toward them, even on horseback if needed. True power isn't about bossing people around, it's about helping them become better. This story isn't just about a man in white robes, it's about you and the mark you'll leave on this world. Don't just sit there amazed, do something with what you've learned. Slam that subscribe button right now, then share this video with 5 friends who need a kick in the pants about what real leadership means. In a world where most leaders just want fame and money, Pope Leo XIV, the quiet fighter from Chicago streets, who became the champion of the forgotten, shows us a better way. I'll be back next week with another mind-blowing true story that will change how you see everything. Until then, remember, your greatness is measured by who you lift up, not who you stand above.